If you can stop talking for 10 seconds, that would be fantastic. You want to hit the start timer on there? You want to hit? You want to start podcasting, genius?
They want to teach kids about sex, 3, 4, 5 years old. Let them learn about sex the way we did, awkwardly. First time I ever fooled around was in the backseat of my father's car. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like 17 years old. I'm out in the woods. It's pitch black. I think I'm doing a good job. I have no idea. I'm so into it, I didn't even notice the cops pulled up. Shined a big spotlight in the car. Said, "Okay, let's move it in there." She stuck her head out the window and said, "Thanks, officer. Maybe he'll listen to you."
Hello, and welcome to Carnival Personnel Podcast. It's just me solo today. We're recording this on Patriots Day in Massachusetts, and Joe is a grown-up with a real job, and Biff in L.A. is a grown-up with a real job, but it's okay because I have an amazing guest today. He's one of that higher echelon of New England comics that has been doing it for several decades. Every single Thursday, Friday, Saturday, probably a couple Sundays every month. He's somewhere in the New England area headlining some kind of show. I'm always amazed that these guys, when I get to do a show with them, are so kind, so mentoring, so supportive with, you know, I'm kind of in the same age group with a lot of these guys, but where I've just got into a couple years ago, it always amazes me how much they're willing to talk with you about material and about style and about how this whole machine works. And today's guest is somebody I finally got to check off the list of people I haven't got to host or feature for yet. It was about 2 months ago at this great place called Kyoto for Chris Flahive. And I think it's like a 100+ seater. Anyways, it was sold out. It was great. It was an insane night. And so with that, we're bringing the guest, Mr. Paul D'Angelo. How are you, my friend?
Hey, what's up, Jock?
You know that show was great because I got to meet your whole family. I think I spent a while talking to your brother and your sister-in-law. You had an old childhood friend who was there.
Yeah,
that was a really fun night.
well, one of the cool things about doing comedy is I'll run into people that I haven't seen for years, and they'll just come out to see me, and probably people I might have never seen again, and we reconnect, and that's pretty cool.
And so we'll just get right into it. What made you think you could do comedy the first time you got behind a mic?
All right, you want me to let me go back just a little bit. My comedic influences when I was a kid, I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. My Italian grandparents lived there. My Uncle Vito lived there. My mother and father, of course, my brothers and sisters. And my father was a great Irish joke teller. He was great. He could tell jokes. He captivated audiences. He used to be asked to be a speaker and stuff. My uncle Vito, who was like another father to me, was a storyteller as opposed to a joke. He would tell real stories about the Italian aunt with a mustache that's better than mine and whatever. And I used to watch them around the table making people laugh, and I thought that was amazing. And they both contributed to my comedic influence because my dad used to wake me up to go see the comedians on the Ed Sullivan Show. Oh, wow. All the great comedians were on there, and my mother go, he has to go to school tomorrow morning. My father said, just let him watch the comedian. And I watched all the Jackie Masons and George Carlin and Rodney Dangerfield and you name it. And my uncle, I stole his Bill Cosby albums and listened to him, and that's where I learned to be a storyteller. I think was Bill Cosby albums, and my family owned a drive-in theater, which is really unusual. I never even mentioned that because to me it seems like it was just my life. But I used to go watch the Woody Allen movies and stuff. So those were my comedic influences. But I never performed in front of people. I never had a desire to be a comedian or whatever. And but it was always funny. We always hear about that. People, oh, I'm funny with my friends and everything like that. But it was. Let's see. Let me see if I can figure this. So I started going to see live comedy in Boston. The one I was really gravitated to was Stephen Wright, because I thought he was a brilliant writer, and I used to go try to see him at the old Comedy Connection on Warren Street in the theater district in Boston, and with no aspirations to be a comedian. And then one day, my roommate from college had a bachelor party, and not. It was more of a roast with about probably 40, 50 guys, and they all got up to do 5-minute little things. Well, I had written stuff for a month about him and mixed my own stuff with some old jokes and things, and probably talked for about 40. Got shit faced before I did it to get the courage up to do it. But after the show, and everyone just went nuts, and they were saying, "Oh, we want to hire you for a show." And I says, "No, I'm not. This is a one-time deal. I have no aspiration to be a comedian or to do this again." But when I started going back to those comedy shows in Boston, instead of being just a spectator, I became more of a critic or more analytical, like looking at, like saying, "Hey, this guy's not that. I think I could do better than that." So I started writing things. I started writing jokes down. Now here's the twist to that. At the time I did that, I was an assistant district attorney in in Essex County, Massachusetts. I think I was supervising the Salem court back then, or maybe no, yeah. And they moved me to Amesbury, eventually Haverhill. But I was working as an assistant DA. I was making $18,000 a year with student loans, and I couldn't pay my bar tab every month. I was desperate. So I said, maybe I could do this. So I signed up for an open mic night at Stitches on Commonwealth Avenue in Boston. Coincidentally, the same night that Louis C.K. got his start, the very same night. Louis was in line. Louis, he reminded me of that a couple of years ago, but he was in line with me and signed up that night at Stitches. And I thought I needed, I said, I wrote 20 minutes of material before I did 5 minutes, because I wasn't worried about my presentation. I had done probably 100 trials, jury trials, or trials in front of a judge. So I wasn't worried about presence or presentation or any of that stuff. I was just worried about having the material. So I went up for the first time. I think Mike McDonald was the host that night, and he literally had to come up on stage and grab me by the arm to get me off the stage, because I was on a roll. And my parents heard about it. They were very encouraging. My mother said, "I'm glad you got that out of your system." And I did probably about a little over a dozen open mics, and then I quit because my parents were on my back. They said, "What are you doing? You're such a good lawyer. This is crazy. You got to get a job at a law firm." So I quit, but I didn't quit writing. And about a year later, not a year later, probably 6 months later, I was ready to take a job with a law firm in Boston. I said, "Give me a little time." And before I took the job, I panicked. I said, "I don't think I want to work for this law firm. I don't think that would make me happy." And I panicked. I called up Mike Clark, who's Lenny's brother, and I called up Barry Katz, who went on to produce Last Comic Standing. And I lied about my credentials. I told them I had been at all these clubs in New York that I had never been at before, and asked if I could do an audition for them. And they said, "Sure, show up, wherever." And I showed up, and I, for the first couple of years of my 40-year comedy career, I used my guitar in my act. Just at the end, I showed up with my guitar. I had some funny songs that I did and jokes that I had written. And they literally took out their book that night and said, "Take your book out." And they started headlining me. And I was doing shows, not just Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I was literally doing like 15 shows every 10 days. I was working pretty much every night a week, and working at the DA's office as a prosecutor at the same time. But all of a sudden I was getting paid cash.
Right.
They were buying me drinks instead of me having a bar tab. It was a very exciting part of my life, and it just took off from there. So I literally did less than 24 open mic nights before I started headlining.
Well, see, this is one of the reasons I was really looking forward to you being on the podcast. And like I said, any of the people like in your class, like, you know what I mean, who've been doing it like the 30, 40 years who will talk to me. It's ridiculous that you do, so I can't say thank you enough. But specifically, where you have a law background, I really wanted to chat because most people think I have a law background. I do not. Look, I've been through the legal system a number of times, so you know, I'm you know, in college. More than a couple nights, I was protective custody. You know, and some for me, some for the patrons in bar fights. But anyways, when I got to LA, I became friends with a gentleman who, you know, is a gigantic lawyer. Doesn't dress as nice as I do, and you know, I dress like a homeless guy. We're not 100% sure he actually has a law degree. We just think he watched every episode of Columbo.
That'll do it.
But he's my you know, my two co-host partners, you know, are my brothers, and this guy, you know, was the best man in my wedding. But he's a huge lawyer, been doing it for 50 years. I mean, he's the kind of lawyer where he repped the family of the woman that Phil Spector shot. So he's that level. Now, but we were defensive partners on a hockey team together for over 20 years. We lived at the beach and Manhattan Beach and drove like over an hour each way 2 or 3 times a week. So I was in the car with him 10 hours a week. I did most of the driving so he could still work and stuff. So I was privy to so many calls. And like if his wife went away for a weekend, I would go over and just read grand jury, you know.
You became a lawyer by osmosis.
Oh,
yeah.
And he's also the funniest person. And this is why I think it's interesting. I wanted to talk to you about it. How much do you equate your being able to control a crowd like you do a courtroom? And when you're not a big crowd work guy, but when you're talking to somebody, I mean, do you survey an audience member like you would picking a jury or the whole thing, the legal question? It's funny because when I talk to my children, especially my youngest one, he has learned I'm never going to ask a question I don't know the answer to. And as a prosecutor, and if you're doing a deposition, the last thing you want is a surprise. So I always remind him that. So when you do crowd work or something, how much of the lawyer comes out?
That's funny you said, well, I don't do crowd work, because it's funny because when I had my own show at Nick's Comedy Stop in the Theater District in Boston for 7 or 8 years, I used to host the shows and I used to force myself to do crowd work. Right. Because it's a skill that's honed. I see a lot of comedians doing crowd work now, but I see it as a lazy way of doing comedy sometimes because they just want to see what happens, or they want to write an act or whatever. But I used to do it, and the people who are very good at crowd work have worked at it very hard, and what looks to be spontaneous is often planned or recollection or just making it look spontaneous, but it's really not. It's something maybe you're taken from your archives, or you've been in a similar situation before. So I do crowd work. So I just wanted to clear up that first. But where the lawyer part came in mostly was your presence. You're getting up in front of a jury. You're speaking to. You have to communicate with people. You have to be efficient with your words. You have to be accurate with your words. You have to respond under pressure. When you've been yelled at by a judge in front of a jury or a crowded courtroom, compared to a heckler, I mean, what's a heckler? How are they going to hurt you? But you make a mistake in a courtroom and you learn. You have to think on your feet. It gives you a little. I think it gave me a lot of organizational skills to be a lawyer. That I was organized anyway, but it made me probably more disciplined too, and a lot of comedy is discipline. A lot of comedians, I got these funny ideas. Did you write them down? Oh, I forgot all about them or whatever. But every girlfriend I had would say, oh, Paul's always asking me for a pen or a piece of paper or whatever when he gets an idea. And every comedian I've helped out said, I didn't know how hard you worked at this, And I said, well, how good do you want to be? Do you want to just be okay? Is it something you want to get out of your system? You want to be the best. So I think all of those skills help me more so than say how to handle a crowd or whatever, because that's something you learn. That's almost a different skill that you learned. And I did evolve handling crowd. Yeah, you don't get hecklers as much anymore. I do mostly theaters and fundraisers and corporate events. You don't get the drunks like you used to get in the clubs, but I know I used to go after hecklers at the beginning, and I remember my late father telling me, he said, "Don't alienate the crowd you're trying to win over." So I learned to handle hecklers in a different way, where I would be very tolerant with them and give them several chances, and then once the crowd realized I had given them, because I don't want to be a bully with the microphone like some people would do, but I'd give them several chances and then turn the crowd against them, saying, "Hey, did you come out? Did you come out here to spend your hard-earned money to listen to this idiot all night, or do you want to hear what I have to say?" And then the crowd would turn on the guy and shut him
Yes.
up for me. And I found that was a much better way for me to handle people like that. But most of the, the definitely the lawyer skills translated into me being able to headline right away, because I didn't have to develop a persona on stage really so much.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have an important case, and every case is important to the two people sitting at the table.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but seriously, and it's funny. I have a friend, Justin George, who's a vet, deployed in Afghanistan, and he's only been doing comedy like a year and a half, and he has such confidence. And I was talking about it one day. It's like there's a big difference between bombing here and bombing in Afghanistan. It's
when
like,
you've been shot at, I mean, a heckler's not going to bother you. So
right.
yeah.
But you have the public speaking thing. And yeah, and let's talk a little bit about your comedy. So you are, there's the crowd work people who, and everybody who does crowd work has prepared material. And then there's the joke tellers, the Don Gavins, who there's no exposition. It's the setup, the beginning of the sentence is a setup and the end of the sentence is a punchline. But you are the kind of storyteller, comedian, where it's every time I've seen you perform, it's just real stories from your life or very relatable things. And you just tell stories in a really funny way. There's jokes in there, but you are just as great. Like when I saw you at Kyoto, you just had such a command where people were just, it was almost like watching people listen to an old time radio show where they were just hanging on what the next word was going to be. And it's just your right turns and stuff like that, catch people off guard, but you tell these really relatable, every man kind of stories that don't have a shelf life.
I think, when you say storyteller, some people would think that a storyteller, okay, so it's a long drawn out story, maybe with something that pays off at the end or something. But and I help a lot of comedians start. You say like, oh geez, Paul and these other guys are gracious to me and they talk about writing, but I love that whole creative process, and I don't mind sharing it with other people, because sometimes I even learn myself by explaining it to others and things. But I tell a lot of these comedians, I said, you might write a joke. All right, let me give you an example. When I lived in LA for 6 years, I was helping out a comedian, and they came over my place, and I said, okay, so what have you worked on this week? And they said, I got a new joke. I said, let's hear it. At the end of the joke, they said, so what do you think? I said, well, more importantly, what do you think? And he said, I think it's a good joke. I said, why don't you want it to be a great joke? And he said, I never even thought of that. And I said, you know what? The joke initially is one thing, but the rewriting process is critical. And when you come to a story, like I tell stories on stage, there are stories that I won't tell on stage that I put into I wrote a couple books. In fact, 2 books particularly. There's collections of stories, but I could tell them in a book differently, because you can get into more description and everything in a story in a book. You can draw a story out and everything, but in front of a crowd, they want to you got to keep their attention. So sometimes editing and stuff is getting the story down to the important words, to the important parts of it, so that you don't have a lot of superfluous language, so you hit the right marks on it and everything like that, and make it interesting throughout the story. And then, and there were times when I used to tell stories, I used to get uncomfortable if I heard people being quiet while they listened to me, and it was uncomfortable to hear quiet until I realized, oh, I've got their attention now, and they're listening. So I realized, okay, but if you get that quiet, you better pay off. You better have
Yeah.
something. And if you have, some of my jokes run for 3 or 4 minutes, but if you do a 3 or 4 minute joke, it's got to pay off at the end. I mean, you could have it written 95%, but if you don't have that, wow, we just stuck with you for 3 or 4 minutes. This thing
Yeah.
better have a great, crescendo at the end, So
Now, being a lawyer and being a comic, which do you think the media or gets portrayed more accurately? Because it's funny, Mike Donovan, put out a book last year, and he had a chapter about how when you see comics in movies and TV shows, they're always, absolute messes in their real life, and they're this, and he's like, and it's and look, I don't know, did you ever perform at the Ding Ho?
no, that was before my time.
So
Yeah.
I am amazed that any comedian who performed at the Ding Ho is still with us. I mean, because none of those guys should be. So maybe there was a time when the debauchery was out of control. But when you see lawyer shows or comedians portray, which do you think it's like it's nothing like that? Which ones do you think they get right?
Well, you know what? Lawyers and comedians are probably like any other job. I mean, there's the good ones, there's the bad ones, and there's a lot in the middle, and then it goes for personalities too. So, lawyers, yeah, there was a lot of debauchery in comedy when I started, but you know what? I had to get up in the morning. I had to be in
Right.
court the next morning. The last 2 years at the DA's office, I supervised the busiest jury session in Massachusetts, and I was working pretty much every night too. So, I mean, a lot of these guys thought I was aloof or something. I wouldn't go drinking with them or afterwards and stuff. I had to go home. I had to get up the next morning. So I was lucky. Not that I was an angel. I wasn't an angel by any means, but I had that to limit me, probably, for the better and stuff. Lawyers like anybody else. They're real people. It's like what's more prestigious than a lawyer? A judge. And I used to have a joke about judge based on real truth. I said the first time you meet a judge, and this could apply to lawyers too, almost. I mean, to comedians also, but first time you meet it, you're in front of a judge. You're so intimidated. Oh my God, this man's like a godlike figure. He's up on a bench. He's got a robe. He's intimidating. Whatever. The second stage is you go, hey, this guy's one of us. He's just like me or you. He likes to watch a football game, have a beer. The third stage is how the hell did he become a judge?
Yeah.
So. But comedians are saying, I find that the comedians who are most grounded are ones who had a real life at some point.
Yeah.
Like when I say real life, like Paul Gilligan's a dear friend of mine. He's an electrician during the day. He works, he supports his family and everything like that. I was a lawyer. Other people, Christine Hurley was raising 5 kids. These people had responsibilities. People who became a comedian and that's it their whole life, I think they're more predisposed to maybe that
Right.
being a little of a mess. And I don't have a story like he went on stage because he didn't get any attention from his fan. I just loved making people laugh. I had a lot to say, and I had a funny way of saying it. And especially when I became a defense attorney, I became a defense attorney by accident, not to get off on a tangent, but
Please do.
I planned to move to Los Angeles. They gave me a big going away party at the DA's office. I stayed for 11 years only because I was making 3 times as much money doing comedy as I was as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, and I became a defense attorney by accident. I won't go into the story, but I was extremely successful. But all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy. I was a prosecutor. If you murdered somebody, if you broke into their house, I stole your car, I put them in jail. I was the good guy. And now all of a sudden, I used to say I did good things for bad people. So the final straw was a motor vehicle homicide case where I represented this kid who had no remorse. He ran over high school student, left the scene. I had to deal with him. People saw me on TV with the crying families, and I go, I'm the bad guy. I said, I can make people laugh. Why am I dealing with crying people here?
Right.
People looking at me like I'm a piece of shit because I'm representing this guy and his stuff. So I had an alternative, and that's when I moved to LA. Um, but I was lucky I had that alternative. But I mean, if I could, make people laugh and be flown to exotic places and work for 45 minutes a night, which is a big, which is a big deal for me. I that was always my goal in life. Was my father was a salesman. My father was a top salesman in the country. He sold self-adhesive labels. You know those little blue labels
Yep,
on the
yep.
Chiquita bananas? He sold all of those. That was his big account.
Wow.
So, and I go, wait, how come my dad's the top salesman for that company in the whole country, but he's on his boat fishing every day? I said, well, I got to get a job where I can earn as much as possible and do as little as possible.
Yes.
And I found it. Yeah.
Well, congrats. So here's a question I always ask for people doing it as long as you, and it's a 3-part question. Did you work for Dick Doherty? And if so, when was the first time he fired you? How long until he hired you back? And do you have any dick bucks?
What's a dick buck? Like money he still owes you?
No. He started a club down by the water. This is before I was in comedy, and Tobin was a young kid helping him run it. He paid comedians in his own currency called Dick Bucks. And they were $3 bills, and you could buy food at the place with it. Hamburgers, fries.
I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, he didn't. His comedy club was on the bottom floor, and there was a nice restaurant above it. And he owned, that whole establishment.
Are you talking about the vault?
No, this was on the waterfront that doesn't exist. But long story short is he didn't think it through, and people could just photocopy those, and he put himself out of business because one day, the opener's on and Tobin can't find the feature. Well, the feature and the headliner were upstairs eating lobsters using their $3.
That's funny.
But
I didn't know about that.
Did you work at like Grill 93 in some of his places?
Dick Doherty. My first introduction to Dick Doherty was at the Crystal Palace for happy hour down in Hyannis. I used to go down to Falmouth for the summers when I was in college and law school, and I used to see Dick Doherty playing the guitar and making people laugh and giving out shots and stuff and down there. And so I kind of knew him a little bit before I started comedy. My first introduction to Dick as a booker is he started up the Vault. And I'll tell you the story. When the Vault opened up, there was Nick's pretty much across the street on Warrington Street. I only worked there forever. Warrington Street. And then 100 yards from Nick's was the Comedy Connection. Then across the street was Duck Soup. And it was I think of the Improv for a little bit, and there was Duck Soup. So when Dick opened up pretty much across the street, they told all the headliners, hey, if you work for Dick, you're not working for us anymore. And I had just got my show at Nick's, so I was vulnerable. It wasn't like I'm now established and, and they need me as much as I need them to fill seats and everything. And I said, that's really not right. I mean, I respect Dick because he kicked his drug problem. He was recovered from his addiction. I gave him a lot of credit for that. And I said, they can't do that to you. So I agreed to work for him, and I agreed to work for half price for the first couple of years so he could get his club off the ground.
Oh, that's great.
So Dick and I had like a little different relationship. Of course, he fucked me later. And
it's not an if, it's a when thing.
But he still remained friends. We used to go ride our Harleys together and stuff like that and everything like that. But people used to work for Dick. In fact, one of my best friends, I want to say, he had his own show for Dick, and he says, it's not a matter of whether he will fuck. He will. It's just when, know. And but I said, but it's up to you if it's worth it and everything like that. And so, it's the funny thing is, I just talked to a booker the other day, I gave him one of my paintings. I gave it to him, and he wanted to pay for it. I said, "Nah, I appreciate the work you give me and everything." And I said, I was just talking about you the other day, and I told someone, I said, I said, he fucks me less than everybody else. And I said, although that's a very low bar. That's a very low bar. I said, but you are the most honest of the dishonest.
That's a great
So, yeah.
line.
So Dick, so everybody, you kind of, you make like I try to tell some comedians will burn a. I remember Bobby Seibel. Remember Bob Seibel?
Yes, I know the name.
Bobby and I were dear friends. He passed away, and Bobby would ask me for advice that was like advice like why did you have to call me for this like Paul, this guy just offered me $300 cash to do this show, but I got a show with Rob Steen, and Rob Steen takes 6 weeks to pay me, and I'm gonna tell Rob to go fuck himself, and I'm gonna tell him I'm not working, I'm gonna work for this. I go, wait, whoa. I said, who this guy, how many shows does he get you? Once every 2 or 3 years he books me. I said, how many shows does Rob give you a year? Rob gives me like 30, 40. Why would you tell a guy to go fuck himself for one show? Oh, I didn't think of that. So, you gotta pick your battles. You don't burn a bridge until the only bridges I burn, people I don't work with anymore. It wasn't worth it to me anymore anyway. But you can't cut off your nose to spite your face. You can't, make a stand and hurt yourself by, oh, geez, I should never, cut my ties with that guy.
No, it's too small of a world because it just everything comes back around. But the funny thing about like Dick is every time I talk to a comedian who's been doing it for a while, everybody has that story with Dick, but all of them are like, yeah, but he gave me so much work when I was coming up. Yeah, but like everybody knows. Hey, look, it's a cost of doing business. You know what I mean? It's like and so. But my favorite stories are, we had it out. He fired me. He calls me 3 days later and says, okay, I need you next Saturday. It's like, wait, I thought you just fired me because that's in the past.
That's like Costanza going into work after he quit, and then he just shows up the next day and like nothing happened. Yeah.
But he's and there's another character who I've not met yet. But when I've been doing this podcast for a long time, but I've only been doing comedy a couple of years. And I've had, comedians on before who I liked and authors and stuff. But when I really got into it and I would have a comedian come on, I would go online to try to find some material, so I could play a clip coming in at the end of the show. And I don't think there's a comedian who's been doing this for more than 20 years. I mean, is it a law that you had to do the Steve Canto show? Like, did every comedian have to? Because everybody that I can think of has done his cable access show at one point.
No, who?
I saw a clip. I think I saw a clip with you on. Isn't it Steve Cantos? Am I saying it wrong?
Wait, Steve Katzos.
Katzos, thank you. I apologize.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has done his show.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, seriously, his archive. Oh yeah,
do you know the kind of audience you get at those cable
8 people,
shows?
like 8 people.
You get like homeless guys that it's cold out and they come in and his grandmothers and things, and he's got me doing. Stevie Katz. Steve is a good guy. The whole everybody who worked there was Greek. Everybody was Greek. Mike Petrubis, Mike. Mike worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a Greek. The Greeks and the Italians very similar and stuff like that. It was a great atmosphere, but. Hey, it was just it was a nice setup, and Steve Katzos, yeah.
And everybody has that so many people like that was their first introduction and to have a clip. So when the internet really started late 90s, early 2000s, getting on his show. Cause like I said, you go through his archive. I don't think he's had, or he hasn't had a named comic. If there's a headliner in New England now who's been doing it for 20 plus years, he's gone through there. So everybody has their Dick Doherty stories and their Canto stories. So at this stage, I mean, so tell me a little bit. I knew about the writing the books. I knew about the law. I don't know about your painting. Tell me about your painting.
Well, you know what? I drew all my life, but a lot of my life I didn't do artwork, and unfortunately, and then I started back a few years ago. The paintings just started, I think, 2017, In fact, there's I don't know if you can see
I
these.
can see the gal. Yeah,
Behind me. These are some of my.
that's
Some
great.
I got them on the wall because they were on the floor and I needed room. That's the only reason they're hanging up there. But yeah, I in fact 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago, I had a 3 week exclusive art exhibit at the Cultural Center in Wakefield, the town I live in, and I literally had probably 300 works of art and things there. That I had done, and I had a whole rock and roll vibe going. I bought a EV sound system and had my favorite rock and roll stuff playing in the background. And it was really it was unlike most art exhibit. It was really like a fun experience, and people had a blast. And so, it's something I tell people oh, you're an artist. Like, I'm a comedian that does art. It's the same way I play in my brother's band. I said I'm a comedian that does music. I said because I see musician, I go, wow, that guy's a real musician. Or I see even artists, I go, wow, that man's like on another level. On comedy, there aren't that many people I look up to. I look as peers mostly.
Right, right.
I know where I stand. So I know you got to know your limitations. People say, oh, do this, and says, oh, I can't do that. No, oh, yes, you can. I go, no, you got to know your limitations.
No, I mean
So
I think you're so grounded because people have delusions of mediocrity and they don't know where their ceiling is or their floor is, and not that people shouldn't reach, but at the same time, like I've been drumming forever, and somebody really insulted Steve Copeland, or Copeland from the Police because I was doing a project.
Stuart
Copeland, and introduced me to him as a fellow drummer. I'm like, you have no idea how much you just insulted Stuart. I can count to 4 fast or slow. This guy, don't say. So I know where my floor and ceiling is with drumming. But with your artwork during the pandemic, you couldn't do comedy. But were you? Well, I can't do comedy, but I can just pour some time into artwork. Did you get through it?
My girlfriend bought me when I used to make models when I was a kid. When I was probably in junior high school, I was entering models into contests with adults where I was taking rigging ships and building planes with camouflage and everything. So I was so bored during the pandemic. My girl said, I want to get you a model. What would you do? I said, I saw this lobster boat thing. I said, maybe I could draw, because I've been around the ocean all my life. I know lobster boats and things. So I said, yeah, I'll give that a shot. Maybe give me something to do. So the box came, and it was about a 3-foot box. And I go, I don't get it. And I opened it up. It was just pieces of wood. I go, what's this? I go, I didn't know. I thought a model ship used to be, you have the hull and then you put the plasma. And this, I had to literally build the same way you would build a boat with the skeleton, the frame, and then I had to bend all the wood and everything, and it was about a 2-month project. And then I built all the little pieces out of myself down on the workbench. I built the lobster hauler, I built the exhaust system, I built little lobster traps and everything, and it was in fact, I had it under glass at my art exhibit because so many people asked about that lobster boat and everything, and it was a great. It kept me sane, during that period. I couldn't do stand up. The other thing that happened during the pandemic is I realized, because I used to work pretty much every night, and I realized it was pretty good to not do anything. Just hang out with the dog on the couch, watch a movie or something, smoke a Jerry, just. I said Jerry, I like somebody knows what that means. So he used to say, why do you call pot Jerry? I said, one time I had the stuff that was so good, I talked like Jerry Lewis the whole time. So people would call me up and say, you going to the concert tonight? I said, oh yeah, Jerry loves concerts. Yeah.
So who are some of your favorite bands?
My favorite, I love like the Who, the 70s stuff. I love Southern rock. I love Lynyrd Skynyrd. I love Allman Brothers. I love Marshall Tucker. I love the Outlaws. I love Zeppelin, Springsteen. All that stuff. And I play guitar. I play not in my brother's band. I just play harmonica in my brother's band. But music is a way for me to. It's kind of therapeutic. It's like the artwork stuff. It's like comedy. Comedy. I've done over, I think, 7,300 shows. I've never missed a show um, people say, how do you do that? You just came from a funeral of a friend, or you came from, or you're sick or something like that. Well, the show must go on, and it seems like whenever that light would hit me, it's like, hey, they don't care if I had a bad day. They don't care
Right.
if I'm in a bad mood, if I don't feel good. These people paid to see me. My name's the one. You have an extra responsibility when you're headlining, because people are buying the ticket to see you.
Yes.
And I never, and you know what? It's funny. Dick Doherty, you mentioned Dick Doherty. One time out of 7,300 shows, I mailed it in a little. I was at a Dick Doherty had some club in a mall in Chelsea, and it was just one of those nights. And I go, this sucks. And Dick said to me, he said something to me to that effect, and I said, I will never do that again. And that was a great piece of advice Dick gave me, and he was right. And I said, I will never give less than 100% when I do a show again. Yeah.
I've had the fortune of doing shows in tiny rooms with great headliners who, long story short, just recently, I don't want to say who the comic is, but because the show should have been bigger and it wasn't. There were 4 people, and this guy, I've been at tapings where this guy's taped a special in front of several hundred people. Those 4 people got the same show that several hundred people got when they taped their special. Those 4 people walked away with the show of a lifetime, and it was just an absolute privilege to watch a master's class in real time, to see a pro say, it doesn't matter if there's 4, there's 400, there's 4,000. These people here are getting, it's not the empty seats, you know what I mean? And it was just so great when somebody, because I mean, there's been times when, I did a show last year and it was a snow thing and should have been canceled, shouldn't. If they had pre-sold, it's a smaller room that only holds like 70, and they had pre-sold like 60 some tickets. Like there's 12 people there. But again, the headliner took a while to get there, got there, and gave the same show they would if it was a packed room. So that advice is solid.
Yeah. You know what? Let's take an extreme. I've been in situations. I'm doing a fundraiser. Say, I'm thinking one thing in particular where I'm doing a fundraiser for a radio station, and the place is mayhem. I mean, there's different activities going on. They're broadcasting live, and they say, you got to do comedy. I said, nobody's going to listen to me here. It's not. I mean, there's certain situations. People say, do you ever have a bad show? The only time I had a bad show is when I knew before I stepped on the stage that this is going to suck. And it's not going to be me. I could go out there and do a whirly bird with my dick and nobody's going to fucking pay attention to me. It doesn't matter. But inevitably, in a situation like that, you'll do your set and one person will come up to you and go, hey, that was great. And you go, you were listening? I didn't, and so I learned to do my set as if one person was listening, and the crowd, a crowd of 12 sometimes can be better than a crowd of 200. It depends on. And I used to tell them, I said, the crowds are like a dick. Sometimes it's not the size, it's the way you use it. So it's. So if you could have a blast with 12 people if they're responsive, if they're good people, and
100%.
And you could be in a situation where it sucks and you hate everybody there. But you know what? People are paying to see you, and you got to deliver. And
I mean that it's that attitude that the veterans really have. That really helps shape the people who get to work on those shows under you guys and say, oh, okay, that's how you do it under this situation. It's always inspiring. So, I mean, it is a privilege. Do you at this point, do you have your, I'm guessing coming through law school and going up through the ranks there and going up the ranks as a comedy, you had a 1, 3, 5 year plan. You had certain goals and milestones you wanted to hit. Do you still set those? Hey, I kind of want this, I would like to accomplish this year, or over the next couple of years I would like to be that, whether it's like I like 10 more minutes of absolutely new material, or I like, you know, to do a show where I haven't got to do a show yet. What are some of the goals that you still set out for yourself?
Well, the material thing is I probably write as much more than anybody. So I do that actually for my own benefit and the benefit of the people, because I feel if I keep it fresh for me, then it's like a kind of like a dog can smell fear. It's like I think a comedy crowd can tell if your heart's not in it, you know. So if I get if I did an hour show and I got a standing ovation, someone say, "How was your show?" I said, "All right," because I knew every one of those jokes is going to work. If I did an hour show and like, "Oh, how was your show?" "Oh, I had this one joke. I think it's going to be great." You know, I get excited about something because I love the creative process. So, as far as like, oh, I got to write some new material, that all started when I was in the DA's office, when people would say, "I'm coming to see you again tonight. You better have new stuff." so I said, "Okay, so that. But you know what? I got to be perfectly honest with you. I'm kind of in a rut right now. I kind of lost a little ambition. I've tried so many things that didn't work, and not because they were a bad project or something. Like I did a sitcom pilot that I produced, I financed, I wrote, I acted in with Patty Ross, Bob Seibel, Frank Santarelli, everything. And I went out to LA. I had 3 production companies, major production companies in LA, who were interested in it. I went out with the pilot episode that I had filmed and everything, and I got there the month that reality TV hit.
Oh, see,
And
yeah.
every one of them pushed the tape back at me and said, "We got this new thing. Reality TV doesn't cost any money. We're not going to produce any new sitcoms right now." And I go, "Well, yeah, but how about this?" Well, if you got an idea for a reality show, and it was just the timing was bad. Then we did The Godfathers of comedy. It was supposed to be a national thing, like the Kings of Comedy, or the Blue Collar. And one thing after another happened that sabotaged that, and it didn't work out. And then after a while, you just go, you know, I have to. Well, I need a new sense of false hope. I need
Yes.
I need something new to fail at. Is what I need. Is it? So I need. When you say what are my goals right now, I'm trying to figure that out. You know, to be honest with you.
No, Paul, I've not had this conversation with somebody who I think I've related to more, because I lived in LA for 20 plus years. I got to work mostly in TV and film, and I had my own production company where we did every Blu-ray and DVD for Universal Music Group for like 7 years. It's amazing. But I had 5 sitcom pilots, and all got picked up. And 3 went to presentation reel, and you know, and it's the same story that everybody like yourself who knows how it works. This is great, but then the person who championed it, they get blown out. The new head of development wants all their new stuff, or you know, I mean, it was just like that. And then when reality hit, and I hate reality TV. When my then girlfriend moved out to LA, I was out there 10 years before I met this woman. She moved out. She loved all that reality stuff. I got her on a reality prank show. It was called Girls Behaving Badly, and the clip's still online. And I was hoping that it would. So what ended up happening is, you know, and the NDA has expired since then, so I can tell you, she's figuring it out in real time that she's being pranked. It was at a restaurant, and the prank was, I had 2 options. We could have pranked her at an IKEA, where a young pretty girl comes up to me and says, "Oh, my parents sent me all this money for furniture that I spent it, but I got to go around IKEA and take pictures and send them back. Can you pretend you're my boyfriend?" Blah, blah. And then she would get more flirty and what's my girlfriend? Jealous type. So I opted to go for it was a fake restaurant, and the waitress was going to be over the top, taking cell phone calls and this. And long story short, when the reveal happens, she was 60% think it was a prank, 40% it might just be a bad day at a restaurant. So her reaction wasn't over the top. And when all the cameras come out from the 5 different angles and they do the big reveal and everybody stands up and starts clapping the restaurant because they're all extras, the producer then comes over and goes, "That was great, but you weren't surprised enough. Can we reshoot that?" And I was like, fan-fucking-tastic. Now she's going to know that all that stuff, Survivor, is bullshit. But I ended up selling a bunch of those things. And again, just before I got into comedy, kind of my last straw was just when the pandemic hit, I was doing a bunch of military tours, taking basketball and some film people to bases around the world, and it was great. And then I did a bunch of online stuff for the USO and AFE during the pandemic. But I had this great show with this solid B-lister, a guy named Greg Grunberg. Greg Grunberg's one of those actors. Nobody knows who he is. When you look him up, he's been in everything you can possibly imagine. His claim to fame is he grew up and he's best friends with the director J.J. Abrams, who puts him in everything but kills him. He was a pilot on Lost. He got killed in the show Alias. He was in the last Star Wars movie, and the last trilogy. He's technically the last rebel pilot that gets shot down in Star Wars. So it was a chit chat. It was great. And we had all these letters of intent and we went back and forth. We had something, and it was really, 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 it was a year development, big production company attached, a lot of big names. And when it got past, one of the interesting things is there's been so much consolidation. So when we pitched to Peacock, the upside is you're pitching to Peacock, which means you're also pitching to NBC, USA, and that network of channels. The bad side, if they passed, 6 people just passed at once. And that's why after that, I was so brokenhearted. And I'm like, I did comedy in the mid 90s when I got out to LA, only because I didn't know anybody and I was bored, and I came from a sketch comedy world. That's why I got back into this. And I get at least once every 3 or 4 months, somebody, one of the other comics, who will look me up and say, "Oh, you've done all this," or they'll see some of the pilots on YouTube and stuff. And they'll be like, "I got this idea." And I want to encourage everybody, but Paul, I'd rather build a garage so I could park my car in it and let it purr me to sleep than go through development again and get my hopes up for that. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fail at comedy. I'm going to get into stand up. So I understand.
I was in LA for 6 years, and my hero was my father, my late father. He had tryouts with the NFL. He was an all-scholastic football player, Gold Gloves boxer, great personality, a politician too. And it was hard to explain to my father. He was the only people I cared about impressing were my mother and father, because I had to validate why I left being a lawyer.
Right.
And I wish I was, if I was a shitty lawyer, it would have been so much easier.
Would have been
for me.
easier. Right.
He would have said, hey, you're not really good at this. Why don't you try stand up? But I was such a good lawyer. But and try to explain to your father, well, how come this guy's on TV and you're not, and you're in LA and everything? I go, the entertainment business is different. Like if you're playing baseball and you're down in the minors and you're hitting 380, they're going to bring you up. The numbers, they're going to bring, but down, it's not 2 + 2 isn't 4 in LA. It's not who's the funniest, who's the most talented. It doesn't make, but how do you explain that to your father?
You can't, so, you can't. And
that's what Hollywood was like,
Well, I mean, think about the poor son of a bitch who was playing first base in the Yankee system during the Lou Gehrig era. You could be hitting 900 in the minors. You're not taking his job. No. And it was so, like I said, there's been so many times, like when you mention a project, so you can really get it. I mean, you can have can't lose, you get out there and the writer's strike happen. And so the networks out of desperation turn to reality TV, which for a good 5-6 year window killed, killed the sitcom. It killed, any of that stuff. And then again, out of desperation, because the reality shows were so cheap to produce, they only wanted proven commodities. How many shows got reboots?
Yeah.
Or revamped, like the new Bewitched, or you can go on and on of everything that Hollywood would do. But yeah, it's so. And again, like you said, you're really happy when a friend of yours gets something, but it's tough when it's like, wait a minute, you passed on this, but you said yes to that, or you'll have it's a couple times. We would have great pitch meetings and it'd be like, yeah, this doesn't really work. And then a year later, you see 3 different shows, similar that another network rolled the dice on that went.
You're in the entertainment industry in Hollywood. I assume that you recognize that sometimes you go, how does anything get made here?
100%.
Like when something comes out good, you're shocked because you see the process and everything, and you go, well, logic has nothing to do with it. What makes sense sometimes, and it's just a weird place.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on this one show called Touched by an Angel, and I don't even like to say that. It was a horrible show ran by a horrible person, but the show did so well. They did a spinoff show that did so well that CBS just told her, give us another show. We don't care what it is. We're going to pre-greenlight anything you walk in. And there was a bunch of writers on the show who came from the sitcom world, who, the showrunner had come from Facts of Life. And they all had amazing pilots and amazing, writers, but they couldn't break through. But yet this person who was a walking piece of human garbage, because they had one success and then a moderate success spinning off of that, CBS was like, we don't care what you walk in with. We are going to go to, and then you sit there and you're like, well, why am I even fucking trying? Why? So like I said, so I understand, like when you say, you kind of in a rut, because it's like, it's tough to have the rug pulled out on you so many times. And when you have something so great like comedy, but you are, Paul, I mean, it's sometimes an overused term, but a renaissance man. I mean, you're a musician, you're an author, you're a painter, you're a headlining comic. Oh, by the way, 11 years, in the district attorney's office. I mean, what is it that you haven't dipped your toe in that you haven't succeeded with on some
There's
level?
a lot of things I can't do.
Were you an athlete?
If you were at my 92-year-old mother's house yesterday for Easter, and my brother made raviolis. He made a sauce from scratch. My sister made all the hors d'oeuvres, and they told me, Paul, bring ice. Just bring ice.
Your brother's a cop, if I remember. Was your brother?
No. My brother's he develops real estate.
Okay.
My brother, yeah.
And were you an athlete? If your dad was an athlete, because you're a big guy, were you?
I was an athlete that peaked around 15.
Okay.
And I played 3 sports in high school and everything, but I wasn't. It's like my brother's son, who's brilliant. Just got into early admission into Middlebury College. He's absolutely brilliant, but he also plays sports. And I watch him play sports. I go, no sports scholarships coming out of there, But everybody's good at different things, Yeah. Everybody can do different things, and
well, you do a lot of things well, and I will let you go enjoy your Patriots Day. But this, I tell you. Oh, I'm not going to let you go yet. What's driving that your family owned? Because we grew up, I lived in Wilmington, humble brag. We lived 2 minutes from the Pinehurst drive-in.
Okay.
And we were there. I mean, we were dirt poor, so it was the thing. My cousins and my aunt lived down the street. There'd be like 8 of us rolling into the station wagon, and like 5 of us on the floor covered in a blanket. And they knew, but we lived in a drive-in. What drive-in did your family own?
It was the Meadow Glen Twin Drive-In in Medford, Mass.
Yes.
It was down the street from the Wellington Circle Drive-In. In fact, when I used to work at the booth collecting the tickets, you'd see the car come in, and it looked like a lowrider because the rear end would be way down because you knew there was people in the trunk and stuff. In fact, we were at the marina where I had my boat, and a guy came up to my brother, and he gave him a $50 bill. He said, "What's that for?" He says, "I found out your family owned that drive-in theater. That's for all the times we snuck in." I felt bad, but I worked there $1.85 an hour. I can't I can't eat popcorn. I made so much popcorn I can't even eat popcorn anymore. And it's funny, and you know, and the drive-in theaters finally, eventually, that land became too valuable because it was seasonal. Obviously, they tried to put the heaters in, you know, in the cars and everything like that, and then they started running dirty movies. Well, the dirty movies in those days, there's worse on network TV now. I mean, you'd see a nipple for like a flash. Like, was it a button? Was it a nipple? I don't know what it was. You know, but I remember my parents arguing with my uncle in the kitchen with the Medford Mercury out there because there was another rear end accident on the Mystic Valley Parkway because some drunk was coming home at night and looked up and saw an 80-foot tit and fucking plowed into the car in front of him. And
because that's where my mom grew up. My mom grew up on the Everett Medford line.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, you're one of the only people. Well, people in New England will know, but my mom lived right off the Fellsway. Like you got off like right by what she lived between the old Ivory soap plant and the Teddy Peanut Butter Company. So depending on which way the wind was blowing, Everett either smelled like soap or Teddy Peanut Butter.
Oh, wow.
So what's at the drive-in now? What when they
there's a mall. We developed into a mall, and then that mall was we had a partnership with the biggest developer on the East Coast, and my brother and I eventually negotiated a deal for the family, and that was their last remaining project that the two partners had in common because they had split with each other. So we knew they eventually. So they took out a construction loan, beefed up the mall, and then intended to sell it. So my brother and I negotiated that thing, and
nice, good for you.
And did that for the family.
I mean, I still love drive-ins. There's still one. There's a couple within an hour of us, but my family, we've done it a couple times in Western Pennsylvania. There's this great drive-in that they only show, like, their claim to fame is they still only show 35 millimeter prints, and they do. Like, we went out not last summer, the summer before, because they showed the original 3 Karate Kid movies all in one night. And so I still, like, look, if you're a product of the 60s or the 70s, I mean, drive-ins were it's just part of our DNA.
I go fix the speaker, because people would run off. They'd either run off, the speaker would be pulled out, or there'd be glass there because they shattered the window because they get drunk and forgot they had the speaker in the window. And we'd have to, and then at night, and then when I don't even know if I had my license yet. I might have just got my license, so I'm driving around the Dodge Power Wagon at night, and there'd be like 1 or 2 stray cars, and you'd go up to the car, and there'd be empties all around the car, and a flask and beer cans, and the guy would be shit-faced, passed out behind the wheel of the car, and I'd go, hey, pal, get out of here, drive home. You're not. Once you get out of here, you're not my problem anymore. Just go home. I don't care if you hit someone. Get out of here. You gotta wake up. Hey, what's going on? Hey, go. I can't go until you leave. Go. Imagine now. Are you kidding me? Now it'd be.
You're a lawyer. The liability. Can you imagine the riders that you'd have to have people sign at this point? Oh, yeah. Paul, you are an amazing person. Again, I've seen you several times before, but honestly, when I started this, it's like, here's the people at one point I really hope to share a stage with, and you were so great that night. I mean, more than your A game, and you were just so gracious. Thank you for coming on this. I cannot say thank you enough, and I really, really look forward to working with you again.
Well, you're a fascinating guy yourself, and I'd like to spend more time with you. You got a lot of great stories, and it was my honor to be on this. I love talking about this stuff, and it was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
The big thing is, Paul, don't forget.
This is why I could never be an international spy like James Bond. Remember that Aston Martin they gave him with all the weapons and the little gadgets on it? What if I was an international spy? They let me take that car home, like, between missions. You think I could resist using fucking machine guns in my front bumper? I'm trying to get on Route 3 from 128. We've been on the line here for a half a mile. You think you're gonna fucking cut my... I don't think so. Say hello to my little friend. Or some guy's... Look at this guy tailgating me. Holy shit. This fucking oil slick will take care of him. Or maybe I'm on a blind date and the girl gets in the car. Oh my God, I'm looking forward to this blind date so much, Paul. I was dying to meet you. Let me tell you a little about myself. I have 4 cats. I'm a huge Jets fan. And I just started taking accordion lessons. I said, that's nice. Bing, the left ejector seat. See you later. All right.
life is hard. Hope I make it.
It's a risk, but I'll take it. Feeling like I'm living stuck in the basement. I'm just trying to get a higher placement. Life is hard, but I'll make it. I can't wait a long time, I'm anxious. I've just gotta get off the pavement so they hear me across the nation.
At TD Bank, we know it's only human to dream. And we're here for you with tools that help you bank the way you want. And we're only just a click, call, or smile away. That's how TD makes banking unexpectedly human.